Hey everybody, Andre here, and today we are going to analyze the title track of probably my favorite game of all time, Deus Ex. Here we go. So Deus Ex is this cyberpunk espionage, dystopian universe type of RPG that came out back in 2000 and was revolutionary in its game mechanics and storytelling and freedom to make different choices. And it really holds up still, so if you haven't played it in a while, you go check it out, especially with some of the mods that kind of modernize a little bit of it. The combat feels a little dated, and the graphics certainly are a little bit funny, but the core of the game is absolutely fantastic, and it absolutely holds up in 2023. But we're not here to talk about the gameplay. We're here to talk about the absolutely fantastic music that was composed by Alexander Brandon, Michel van den Bos, and Dan Gardopi. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced any of those names. But the majority of the tracks were composed by Alexander Brandon. And today we're going to focus in on the title track, the main thing that runs in the opening credits when you start up the game, you start up the menu, and it's this really interesting blend of genres. There's a lot of this like techno pop stuff that happens throughout the game. But at the same time, there's a lot of classical elements to it, which kind of lend itself really nicely to the analysis that I like to do. So I thought we would go through, we would listen to parts of it. Of course, I'm not going to play you the whole thing in its entirety, but I will link my reference video in the description below if you want to just quickly refresh yourself on what it sounds like. It's really short. It's just over 2 minutes long. But it's absolutely iconic, and hopefully it'll bring back some nostalgia vibes for you. So here we go. Let's analyze this piece. So a little bit about the methodology of this analysis first. I go from large to small, macro to micro kind of analysis. So what I mean by that is I look at the big form first before I work into the smaller details of harmony and melody and whatever. We're not going to unpack every single note because otherwise this video would be way too long. So I'll touch on interesting highlights that I think help put the piece together in its totality. And then maybe I'll give a little bit of my subjective stuff on how it relates to elements of the storytelling too. But that's a secondary objective here. The main objective is to show you the form of this piece and show you the cool things that happen within the form. So here we go. So like I said in the onset, there are a lot of classical elements present throughout the soundtrack of Deus Ex, and definitely so in the main title theme, in that the form of it is ternary form, which is a very common type of classical musical form. And what ternary form is ABA. So it's three-part form where the A section at the beginning, elements of it come back in some way at the end. And then there's a digression in the middle, the B section, where different things happen. But there's also this ancillary part at the beginning, the introduction, which goes from the start to the 28-second mark. And I'll put the time codes at the bottom of this video below so you can keep up. And like I said, the video that the reference video is going to be in the description. So definitely do listen to that before we start. Pause this video, go to another one, go to that video, listen, and then come back. Okay, so introduction until 28 seconds. After that, we have the start of the A section. And the A section lasts from the 28-second mark all the way to 1 minute and 2 seconds. Roughly, there's like half a second here and there. We'll use that as a plus or minus within the second mark. Okay, so up until the 1 minute and 2 second mark, we have the A section. The A section itself is interesting because it's split into two smaller phrases. So we have basically a section that happens at first, and then we have a repeated phrase with some extra things on top of it. So A section in 2 parts. So that's cool. Now we go to the B section. The B section lasts from 1 minute and 2 seconds all the way up to 1 minute and 59 seconds, roughly 2-minute mark. And the B section has some other things go on inside of it. There are 3 smaller phrases within the B section, which are kind of cool. And we'll talk about those in just a little bit when we listen to it together. And then the A section returns at the 2-minute mark and lasts until 2 minutes and 16 seconds. And it's really A prime because it's not exactly the same as the A section in more ways than one. Most notably, like I said, the first A section has 2 phrases, but this second A section only has 1 phrase. So that's kind of cool. And then after that, we have basically a coda, but it's really hard to say that it's a coda. It sounds a little bit like the introduction in that it has this kind of like drawn out ambient thing, but you could say that it's just the last chord of the A prime. So there may or may not be a coda, but if you wanted to call it a coda, it lasts from 2 minutes and 16 seconds through the last 8 seconds of the track. But that's a little bit dubious. It could be a coda, or it could just be the last chord of the A prime section. So that's the overall form, the large form. Now let's listen and talk about the smaller form. So here's the introduction. Kind of ambient sound here, welcoming you into the mystery. Now the lead up. A section. So you can kind of break up the introduction into two elements, 2 parts. It's sort of hard to call them phrases. It's more of a gestural kind of thing. So you have the first part, which is essentially 2 chords. You have the A minor chord, but then you have the 7th on top too, which is kind of sweet. And then you have the E. It starts off in an E 5th, and then it turns into an E minor 7 chord. And so you have kind of an interesting, oscillation back and forth. Very gentle, very mysterious. And then you get the start of the drums come in, and you have the dum ba 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 bum bum, which heralds in the start of the A section. So let's listen to that lead up again. I think that this is about minute and 19 seconds right here. So from the beginning to a minute and 19 seconds, it's just A minor 7 and E minor 7. And then finally, at that minute and 19 second mark, we get the bum 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 bum, which is our our pre-A theme. It's our lead up, our preparation into it, and you get the snare drums. And the interesting thing about the use of the percussion is this kind of militant style. There's a lot of that kind of military. There's a lot of military themed stuff. A lot of the government going on in this game. So the use of that military style percussion section is very appropriate and kind of leads us into the affect that we're trying to get, the atmosphere of the game. So that's the introduction. Not too much to say. It is in 2 smaller bits. First part sort of ambient, and the second part ramping up with the percussion section and that theme. All right, now let's listen to the A section. I'm going to rewind slightly, and we're going to start the track at around 24 seconds. Okay, so we're going to catch the tail end of the introduction going into the A section. So here we go. A section. So iconic. Second phrase. Section. So that's the A section. You heard the 2 sections, right? The 2 phrases. The second one was the repetition of that main theme. That's such a cool melody. It's very iconic. So he goes E, A, C, B, A, F, E, and that F is sort of like this downwards leading tone towards the dominant note. And then that downwards thing is E, D, C, B, E. So it's a mixture of scalar notes and also these leaps. This perfect fourth and then a minor third, sort of outlining the A minor triad. It's super cool. Harmonically, there's not that much going on in this. So we have A minor, da 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 da, E, probably E7, E da 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 da, E7, which is 5/7. So 1 ba da 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 and 5/7 ba da da da, 1 da 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 and 5/7 bottom, and then the melody changes. So the first 8 measures, it's basically 4/4 time, and 8 measures long, this first part, and it ends on a 5 chord, okay? And then the next 8 measures, we actually have a change in harmony. We go from this E7 chord, bum, ba-da-da, go to a C major chord, bum, ba-da-da-dum, G major, and then E7, A minor, bottom, E7. It's so classical. You can imagine that maybe Beethoven would have written that, right? It's so classical in the way it's presented. So those chords do take a turn. So in the A section, yeah, the first phrase is just 1 5 1 5 1 5. Okay, 1 5 1 5 1 5 1 5. And then the second part, we have the C major chord to start, which is major 3 in A minor, the relative major, which then goes to G major, which is the subtonic, or it's the 5 of the relative major. And then after that, it goes to the E7 chord. Interestingly, I believe that it's in first inversion, although I can't really tell with the track, but I'm pretty sure it's in first inversion because the bass motion goes C, G, G sharp, A. I'm pretty sure. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. And then it goes back to the 1 chord, the A minor chord, and then another E7, so another 5/7. So a slight deviation in the harmony, but it's not like super outlandish. It's still firmly in the key of A minor. But the melody does change, right? It goes... So outlining the C major chord, E, D, C, G, C, D, E, F, E, D, C, B, A, B, C. Very, very scalar. And then the cool bit is that it does this kind of leaping appoggiatura thing. So what an appoggiatura is, it's a leap step. So it leaps into a dissonant note and steps into a consonant note. So ba da 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 ba dum ba dum. Those F to E appoggiatura, super cool, but sounds almost like Mozart. So it's really, really awesome. And then it repeats. Now on the repeat, we have basically the same thing, except there's an extra line on top. There's that extra counter melody in what sounds like the violins, right? So we basically have an extra phrase, 2 phrases. So what would we call this in classical form? Well, the first of those phrases, the 8 bars with the 1 5 1 5, ends on a 5 chord. So if something ends on a 5 chord, you know, that's a half cadence, right? And then the second part of it is interesting because it's, if you go by that same structure, the same 8 bar structure, on the 8th bar, it's still a 5 chord. But do you hear the cadence on the 8th bar, or do you hear the cadence on the downbeat? Let's go back. Let's listen. Okay. So this is that second phrase. Where do you hear the cadence? I hear it on the downbeat of the next measure. So this is where kind of you have to do the music theory thing. There's 2 options, depending on how you hear it. There's either option A, which is you have 8 measures, half cadence, 8 measures, half cadence, starts again. Or 8 measures, half cadence, 8 measures plus 1 beat to account for the authentic cadence going 5 to 1. If it's the second part, the one that I just said, with the cadence on the downbeat, first of all, that cadence is called an elided cadence. And what that means is that it's a cadence that belongs both to the previous phrase, it's the end of the previous phrase, and it's also the start of the next phrase. So that's called an elided cadence. And if that's true, This is a classic period. So what a period is, it's two phrases. One phrase ends with an inconclusive cadence, like a 5-chord, half cadence. And then the second phrase ends with a authentic cadence, or a more conclusive cadence. So it's a period. Classic period. If you don't hear the cadence on the downbeat, which I could understand, then it would just be a repeated phrase, both ending with half cadence. Like, not a repeated phrase, excuse me. A phrase group, which is just a simple way of saying it's two different sections that both end in cadences, but there's not necessarily a hierarchy. That's not how I hear it, though. I definitely hear it as a period, and I would put money on the fact that I think that Alexander Brandon thought about it as a classical form, like a period. All right, so that was the A section. Now let's go on to the B section, which is quite different. So let's listen to it first. Keeps going. This is the part of that B section. So awesome. And then the A comes back. So the B section is really interesting. It's very dynamic. There's so many things going on. Let's talk about the first phrase of the B section first. So harmonically, we have a departure. We start. We started the piece in A minor, but bum 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 bum. It's this kind of G minor in first inversion that transforms into a B flat major chord. And then D minor chord. So the arrival of the B flat sort of starts to signal our departure, or our shift. Let's call it a shift away from A minor and into D minor. Back to B flat, and then G da 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 dum bum, D minor bum bum bum, which is 5, right? So the whole chord progression, there's a common tone modulation. So A minor was 1, and now it's 5, basically. And D minor was 4, and now it's 1. So it's kind of cool. So yeah, A minor is now like sort of 5 in the new key. G minor is 4 in the new key. And then D, of course, is 1 in the new key. B flat major is 6 in the new key, and then G minor, which is 4, and then D, which is 1, and then A is 5, and then after that we go to this E chord, which is 5 7 of 5 in D minor, or just 5 7 of 1 in the original key, which is where we go. So we have this 8 measure long phrase that starts the B section. And the melody is really cool. It continues the use of the outlining of a triad and scalar stuff. So that's basically a C major chord. Bum, 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 bum. Landing on that F there. And then bum, bum, ba, da, da. Accented passing tones. So the melody goes like this. Bum, 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 bum. That E kind of has an extra quality to it. It's not in the B flat major chord. And then it goes down. And then bum, ba, da, da, ba, dum, bum, ba, dum. It's so cool. It really sounds like it belongs in a classical piece. But then after that, we have this other thing that happens. So the first part of B goes from 1 minute and 2 seconds to 1 minute and 18 seconds. And then at 1 minute and 18 seconds, which I'll cue up right now, we have sort of something a little bit different. It's kind of this A open fifth. I think there is a C in there, but it's just this A minor sound. Bum bum dicka dum bum bum dicka dum bum bum dicka dum. And then on the fourth beat we have this dun dun dicka dum bum dum. We have this Neapolitan sound, the B flat kind of creeps in there. I'm not sure if the other notes are there or not. I can't quite tell, but there's definitely that solid low B flat. It goes A, then B flat, that creeps up. It's got that flat 2 sound, and adds to, it's kind of like the sinister sound. So listen to it again. It's pretty subtle. It's on the 4th beat. You hear that? It's kind of like the low brass sound. And then that violin riff, it's straight out of classical music. I mean, you could hear that in a Beethoven piece all day long, right? So E, F, E, C, E, B, E, A, B, G sharp, E. It's so cool. And it sort of comes out of nowhere. It surprises you almost, as if we're stuck in this dum dum chicka dum 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 chicka dum. Da 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 da. It's pretty interesting. But this whole section, from 1 minute and 18 seconds to 1 minute and 34 seconds, is this kind of transitory thing. It's a transition from one part of the B section to another part of the B section. After that, at 1 minute and 34 seconds, we have this absolutely awesome thing that happens. So let's listen to this cool thing. So, did you pick up something kind of interesting about the form of it? So, this next part of the B section, the first part of B was 8 measures long. Then the next part of B was 8 measures long. In the A section, we had 8 measures and then 8 measures. So, we've been working with 2s so far. But this next part of the B section, it's actually 3 parts. There's 3 8-measure phrases. And it's interesting. It's like this extra phrase tagged onto it. And I can't possibly know, but when you have something really cool like that, whatever that instrument is, I can't tell you. It's this futuristic synth type of sound. When you have something that cool, you want to hear more of it, right? So when it starts riffing, it's like kind of pumps you up. If I was to guess what the notes are, I think they're pretty close to C, D, B, C, A, C, D, G, E, C, D, B, C, A, C, E, B, B, G. So, I can't really know without seeing the sheet music, but it's pretty close to that. I think I've got it. So it's interesting because there's some extra frequencies that going on that are happening in those sounds. Just hear it once again here. It's confusing because there's a little bit of a delay going on also, so there's a lot of really different notes. So maybe if you have a better ear than I do, you can try to decipher that. But I think the core of that riff is... That's the core of the riff. And then on the, there's extra tones that kind of beef it up. But I don't know what instrument that is. It's super awesome. That's all that matters to me. And really kind of pumps you up. But it's related to that second part of the B section because it has that bum, 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 the A pedal that happens, which was set up in the second part of the B section. So all that is to say that it sounds like it's a new thing, but it's really a continuation of what was set up at the start of the B section. That's why I've lumped it all together into one. Perhaps that's not the correct way to go. Perhaps the initial thing that I labeled as the first B at 1 minute and 2 seconds, maybe that's the transition. And then the kind of synthy stuff is more of a C section. I can't I'm just making my own educated guess on what it is. But I've given you my reasons. All right, and then after that, we have the return, the recapitulation, if you will, the A prime. And let's listen to it, but it's a little bit different. And yeah, it's a little different. So I'm just scrolling forward here. Here we go. This is the tail end of that B section. Yeah, so it's got that. It's still that same period. It's still that same 8-measure phrase. But so I stand by the fact that I think that's an elided cadence at the end, and I stand by the fact that I think it's a period. But how cool is that effect? It wouldn't be appropriate to call it the A section again because it's not an exact recreation of the initial A section. That's why I call it A prime, which tells you that it's related. So it has the same melody, of course. That hasn't changed at all. But it's presented in what sounds like an oboe, and it's got this cool delay effect. Now I'm listening in headphones, and I can really clearly tell the panning that's going on and the delay too, which is it's really sweet. So the actual melodies sort of center, and then the different delayed oboe melody stuff are kind of bouncing around my head, which is really sweet. And then you'll also notice that they kind of like these orchestral hits rather than constant harmony underneath. So the texture is quite different. Yeah, it's a shorter one too. It's only 8 measures long. It's not that double A section like it was before. So yeah. Very, very cool. So, to summarize. Oh, yes, and like I said at the very end, we have that kind of that chord. And it's not really a coda. We have this last A minor chord. But then there's this kind of extra note going on, if you hear it. Let's see if you can hear it. This, like, industrial tone in there. The added fourth. And that sound is really it might be the same instrument as the cool riff in the B section. It might be, I'm not totally sure, but it's certainly related. It's got that type of sound quality to it, which is another way that things tie in. All right, now let's recap the form, and then let's talk about the implications of what that actually means for how the music ties into the game itself. So we had a 3-part section with an introduction. The A section was split into 2 phrases and 2 smaller forms. They're both periods, okay? And the harmony was basically in the key of A. Now, in the B section, we had a small deviation, a small digression to the key of D minor, but then we quickly came back to A. The B section is made up of 3 different parts. We have one 8-bar phrase, one 8-bar part, then another 8-bar kind of transitory phrase, and then a 24-bar riff that happens that's sort of related. So the B section has more stuff in it, more phrases than the other 2 sections. And then after the B section is over, then we get back to the A prime really, because it is like the A section, but it's been shifted, it's been changed. And then we have that final chord with that extra electronic stuff at the end. So what does this all mean for the game? How does this help tie in to the rest of the music? And it's quite an extensive soundtrack. It's a huge game. It's a huge game that takes many, many hours to complete. And there's a lot of themes that happen. There's a lot of ambient music that goes on through the rest of the soundtrack. There are a lot of these repeated riffs that happen. The most iconic for me, the one that I love the most, is the Hong Kong one, when you're walking through the streets of Hong Kong. I always it's the one that sticks with me the most. The Hell's Kitchen one is fantastic. The VersaLife one is awesome. It's just like so many iconic ones. You can just look all of them up and listen to them. It's they're super cool. But how does the theme present itself through the rest of the game? Well, you have the bum ba da dum. It actually plays throughout different themes. It comes, it comes back in different tracks as well. The military, the sound of it, the percussion section definitely comes back, especially in combat. The game has it got a dynamic combat sound system. So when you're just walking around, the music is more, it's different than when you start fighting. And some of the stuff that you hear in the B section is often heard in combat. The whole synthy electronic bit in the B section especially really emphasizes the fact that this is a futuristic sound. I mean, you can't quite place what that instrument is supposed to be. Whereas all the other stuff, especially in the X section, you really know what they are. I mean, you got strings, you got brass, you got oboe, you got all sorts of very familiar sounds. Even though it is all MIDI generated, you can still make up what the instruments are. But in that B section, it is that future. The future sound is being shown to you. So that, I think that's really cool. And then most cool, I think, or the most memorable to my ear anyway, is what happens at the A prime. That delayed oboe sound. Specifically, that oboe sound comes back later on in the game. A leitmotif when you come into that section of the game, and then you hear that. It's so familiar, but it's like, it's really spooky. It's really spooky. I think you're in the France portions of the game, I believe. So yeah, it's really it's not just like a one and done kind of theme. It actually presents itself through the rest of the soundtrack, and I think that's awesome. When there's self-referential stuff that goes on, it really helps with the continuity of the music. So I hope you enjoyed my little take on the Deus Ex title theme. I think it's one of the most iconic melodies in RPGs, certainly from the 2000s. It's so cool. And every time I hear it, I just like immediately, all right, I'm just gonna boot up this game now and start that Liberty Island level again. So if this was helpful for you, if this was interesting at all, do let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear back. I'd love to hear feedback. I've tried to be thorough, but I can't possibly touch every single note, because this would be a super long video. And frankly, my ears are good, but they're not perfect. So picking up on every single little detail is quite challenging. So if there is sheet music available somewhere, please let me know. Alexander Brandon, if you are watching this video for whatever reason and you have sheet music available, I would love to see it. But yeah, if you enjoyed this, if this was useful for you, subscribe please. I'm going to have more of these videos coming. But yeah, I really appreciate you watching. This is really fun for me to make. So I'll catch you in the next video.